We are days away from the special election to fill Virginia's 11th congressional seat. Election day is Tuesday, September 9th. Voters in Fairfax County and the city of Fairfax will choose a successor to the late Gerry Connolly, who passed away in May after battling cancer. We have invited both candidates seeking this office to join us in studio to discuss the issues impacting your lives. And last week, Republican Stuart Whitson was here. And today, we welcome Democratic candidate James Walkinshaw. He was chief of staff for Congressman Connolly for more than 10 years. He is currently serving his second term on the Fairfax County Board of Supervisors, representing the Braddock District, where he is also the chairman of the board's legislative and environmental committees. Mr. Walkinshaw joins our Lorenzo Hall right now on the news desk. Lorenzo.
Yeah, thank you, Annie. Mr. Walkinshaw, thank you for being here with us.
Thank you for having me.
So we have a whole 15 minutes to chat, so plenty to go through
I'm excited.
now. First up, for voters who may not be familiar with you and what you stand for and your record, what are some of your priorities if you are elected?
Well, thanks for having me today, Lorenzo. As you noted, I was Gerry Connolly's chief of staff for more than a decade. I've been on the Fairfax County Board of Supervisors for almost 6 years now, and my focus throughout my career has been making Northern Virginia and Fairfax an even better place to live, work, raise a family, retire, and I'll take that same approach in Congress. Right now, our community is uniquely under attack by the Trump administration. The 80,000 federal employees who are in Fairfax are under attack. Our small businesses are under attack. Folks who need access to affordable health care are under attack. So I want to go to Washington and fight for our community and deliver results.
Yeah, so you talk about those 80,000 federal workers under attack right now. Those DOGE cuts have had a significant impact on folks living in Fairfax County. So how do you help people who are still looking for their next job right now, who are still struggling to make ends meet?
Well, step one is we need to stop the bleeding. We need to push back on the DOGE cuts, and Republicans in Congress right now are pushing a budget that would double down on a lot of those harmful cuts to federal agencies and federal jobs. So we need to fight back against that. But we also need to support folks who are looking to make that transition. And in Fairfax County, right away when the Trump administration started these cuts, we stood up a resource hub for federal workers. We've organized job fairs. So we're going to support folks any way we can, but we also need to speak out for them that what is taking place in Washington is wrong. And not just because we care about our federal workers and small businesses who are here, but we care about their mission on behalf of the American people and want them back at work delivering on that mission, supporting the American people.
So what does fighting back look like at this point? We hear a lot of people speaking, if you will, and protesting against what they see happening in Washington right now, but nothing seems to be stopping the Trump administration and Republicans in Congress from doing what they want to do, what they said they were going to do, from implementing their agenda. So what does action look like in this case, aside from speaking out?
Sure. So I have laid out a three-step process that I'll take if I'm successful on September 9th, while Democrats are in the minority in the House, which is the case today. Investigate, litigate, and mobilize. So I think Democrats in Congress can be doing more. I wish some Republicans would join with them to investigate the law-breaking, the wrongdoing, the incompetence that's taking place at the highest levels of the Trump administration and shining a light on some of the worst practices that we know are taking place. Litigating, there are hundreds of lawsuits across the country, including some led by federal workers who are fighting back against the illegal cuts to their agencies and their jobs. I want to support those efforts. And then mobilize. I do think protesting and speaking out are really important in this moment, and I'll support those efforts.
All right, so you've talked about rebuilding a, quote, better federal government. What does that look like?
The Trump administration has done a lot of damage. We see just this last week at the CDC, hundreds of years of experience and knowledge that have protected this country from disease and danger, walking out the door, being driven out the door. It's going to take us a long time and a lot of work to rebuild from damage like that. So I'm committed not just to taking on Trump, but over the long term, working with the federal workers who are here in our community and their organizations and unions to rebuild that federal government with the expertise it needs to deliver for the American people.
Well, what does rebuilding look like? Because, we've seen over time, especially when, we've had these standstills, if you will, in Congress, getting the budget through. A lot of folks were furloughed. They started to lose confidence in the federal government and the stability that, quite frankly, the federal government provided. And you have what we're looking at right now. So how do you convince people that the federal government works and this is where you should want to work?
Yeah, so I think we always have to be working to make every level of government more effective and more efficient. And I've done that at the local government level. As Gerry Connolly's chief of staff, I worked alongside him to pass bipartisan legislation to reform procurement and contracting processes to save billions of dollars and make those processes more effective and more efficient. So I think Democrats and Republicans need to come together in smart ways to make government more effective. Right now, what we're seeing is just kind of a sledgehammer chainsaw approach that isn't saving money and isn't making the government more effective or more efficient, and I want to change that.
You've been talking about Democrats and Republicans coming together. I think a lot of folks watching at home don't even believe that can happen at this point. You still think that's possible?
I think it's a very hard time right now,
Yeah.
and certainly on the big issues, I think it is very difficult. I think the Trump administration and Republicans in Congress have taken a go-it-alone approach on a lot of these issues. We see that with government funding right now. They're not trying to work with Democrats. I do think there's a possibility over time to find those issues that are under the radar, less controversial, and find reasonable folks to work with quietly. I watched Gerry Connolly do that for more than a decade. I do think there are still opportunities to do that.
Yeah, and speaking of the work you've been doing, we know your opponent has criticized you and the Board of Supervisors for standing in the way of economic development in Fairfax County and bringing the ability to bring business to the county as well, saying too many regulations, taxes, not enough incentives for these companies. What do you say to that?
Yeah, it's just flat out wrong. Look, Fairfax County is the economic engine of the Commonwealth of Virginia. We continue to lead all of the rest of Virginia in job creation. We're creating more jobs here than the rest of Virginia is. We just announced a couple weeks ago a major German corporation bringing jobs here. There are 12 Fortune 500 companies in Fairfax. We work very closely with our Economic Development Authority, with our Department of Economic Initiatives, with the private sector to bring jobs into Fairfax County. We're doing very well with private sector job creation and bringing new businesses into Fairfax. But we are shedding federal jobs because of the Trump administration's policies. And we need Republicans like Glenn Youngkin and my opponent to stand up and speak out against the Trump administration as they are recklessly firing our neighbors. And they put politics ahead of protecting our neighbors, and that's something I will never do.
All right, let's talk about education now. What is the federal government's role in education? We've heard that debate on and off for the last couple of months now.
Sure. So if you look at the Department of Education, historically it has had two primary roles. One, to make sure that federal funds that Congress appropriates and designates to a handful of critical programs makes its way to the local school districts that need it. Title I funding is the largest, funding for schools that educate kids who are living in poverty. Really important in Fairfax County and across our region. So they got to make sure the money gets to the kids in the classrooms that need it. Second, the Department of Education has played a key role in doing cutting-edge research and funding cutting-edge research to improve the way we teach our kids. And phonics-based reading is an example that a lot of conservatives have embraced and advocated for and is now the norm in Virginia. Some of that research came out of the Department of Education. So the Trump administration's dismantling of the Department of Education puts critical funding at risk and puts that research at risk. We will never know what the new technique to utilize in the classroom we're missing out on because of these cuts.
What about your opponent who says, you know, parents should be able to decide, or local school leaders should be able to decide how this money is used and what students are taught in the classroom?
Well, local school leaders do get to decide how the money is used and what's taught in the classroom. My opponent supports a radical voucher scheme that would defund our local schools. It's been tried in other states, and what we've seen is a lot of those taxpayer dollars going to wealthy families who are already putting their kids in private schools. And I respect any family who chooses to educate their kids in a private school. I just don't think that taxpayer dollars, our taxpayer dollars, should be going to schools that have no accountability. They're not accountable to the public in any democratic way, and they don't educate all kids. Private schools regularly turn away kids who have the most challenges. So if you have a kid with a disability, private school doesn't have to and often will not educate your child. Our public schools accept and educate every child no matter their needs, and we can't risk their funding.
Yeah, well, speaking of funding, we know that there are currently 5 school districts in Virginia standing against the federal government, saying they will not change their policies when it comes to transgender students and the restrooms and locker rooms they can use. What do you say to the parents and the people in Fairfax County who actually stand with the Trump administration and their policies when it comes to this issue?
So the policies in Fairfax County Public Schools are consistent with federal law, they're consistent with state law, and it's actually not the federal government, it's the Trump administration who is suggesting those policies should be changed, changing them would actually violate the law. Look, our policies in Fairfax County protect the safety and the privacy and the security of every student in our schools. We're going to continue to do that. But to me, I wonder why folks like my opponent and Glenn Youngkin and Donald Trump are so obsessed with how maybe 1% of our kids are using the bathroom and don't seem to care how 100% of our kids are doing in the classroom. I'm focused on how 100% of our kids are doing in the classroom with a great teacher that's paid what they deserve and fully funded programs so they can reach their full potential.
But we've looked at some of these board meetings, even the protests before then you had that took place last year. You know, a lot of folks are still concerned about this or have something to say. So how do you what do you stand with that? How do you quell sort of the anger, the frustration here on both sides?
Yeah, look, I think everybody has a right, and it's a great thing about America. As of today, folks have a right to come out and speak their opinion, and schools have always been kind of a venue for those kind of discussions and debates, and I am sure those will continue, and I welcome that dialogue.
All right, your opponent says you're soft on crime.
Fairfax County is the safest large jurisdiction in the United States of America. That's not me saying it, that's the Association of Chiefs of Police who compile the violent crime data, and they look across the country. We are the safest. The district that I represent is the safest police district in Fairfax County. So far from being soft on crime, we're tough on crime and smart on crime in Fairfax. We invest in our police department, we invest in our communities, we build partnerships with our communities so we can track down anyone who's committing crime or violence in Fairfax County.
Smart on crime, what does that look like? What do you mean? What are you employing in the county that may be different from some other localities in Virginia?
Yeah, look, we use technology to the fullest. We have a very impressive real-time crime center where we are tracking anything that's taking place across the county. We have fully funded police department that just does an amazing and incredible job and works every day to partner with our community to keep everyone safe.
Are you in support of so-called sanctuary cities?
Well, look, I think the name sanctuary cities is false. I don't think there is such thing as a sanctuary city. The federal government has the legal right to detain and ultimately deport anyone who's violated federal immigration laws. What I don't believe is that federal taxpayers should foot the bill to enforce federal immigration law. What I don't believe is that we should break that trust between our immigrant community and our local police department that is really critical to preventing crime and solving crimes. I don't want to have a situation where a victim of domestic violence, and I've done a lot of work on domestic violence in my career, is afraid to come forward to the Fairfax County Police Department because she might be afraid that they'll alert ICE that perhaps she or someone in her household is an undocumented immigrant. I don't think that makes our community less safe. Our system works in Fairfax County. That's why we're the safest large jurisdiction in the United States of America. I don't want to disrupt it.
All right, so we know a lot of folks right now are struggling, again, to make ends meet. You're talking about housing. That is a critical issue in Fairfax County. We know that the median rent for housing starts at $2,600. That is a lot, a month. July this year, the median sales price on a house was $769,000.
Yeah.
So how do you lower the price of rent and mortgage for folks?
So this housing affordability challenge that we have in Fairfax and in our region is a result of success, right? Because we've been so successful in economic development, as we were talking about earlier, a lot of people want to live here, and that drives up the cost of housing. So first and foremost, we have to recognize that there's a lot of demand for people to live in our community, and we have to match that demand with increased supply of housing. And on the Board of Supervisors, I have supported removing red tape and bureaucracy that prevented the construction of new housing. We have tens of thousands of new housing units approved to move forward just in Tysons and thousands across the rest of the county. I've led to create new communities of committed affordable housing units in my district. We now have a new building going up right in front of the government center. There'll be 279 affordable units.
What
with
is affordable, by the way? We always hear that term.
Sure.
But a lot of folks still end up struggling. So how do we define affordable housing?
Yeah, so the way that we define affordable housing is that your rent or mortgage payment is less than 30% of your income. right? Because we know if you're spending 50–60% of your income on your rent or mortgage, you are going to be really stressed financially in the other areas of your life. So we look at that 30% number. But one of the things that I realized when I was looking at this project in my district is it's one thing if you have affordable housing, but if you don't have affordable childcare and affordable transportation, your life is not affordable.
Yeah.
So that's why in the project that I've been working on, we're going to have childcare that's affordable to those same families that can afford the apartment units that are in the building.
All right, sounds like we have roughly a minute left. So if you are fortunate enough to go to Capitol Hill, how do you work with Republicans? How do you get anything done in this current state of affairs?
Sure. Like I said, I think you have to go into it with an open mind. I'm not naive about Trump and congressional Republicans. I think you can find those below the radar ways to work together. But quite frankly, I think for us to make progress in our region and to protect the federal workers and the small businesses and the immigrants who are under attack, we need a Democratic majority in Congress in January of 2027 after the midterm elections. And that's something I'll be working towards.
Okay. September 9th, you're getting close.
Getting there, yeah.
James Walkinshaw, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you.
We appreciate it.
Really appreciate it.
Great conversation.
Thank you.